I'm Stephanie Shelton, and this is episode 34 of Conversations on Health, How We Get There. What do we actually know about autism? Not enough, according to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Health and Human Services Secretary. He's promised an initial $50 million for his plan to find out exactly what causes autism, with an unusually short turnaround for research proposals. Remember that Kennedy first promised that he would have all the answers by September, and then it was March, and now it appears by the funding guidelines it will be a year or more, and that's still faster than most research norms. Many health experts fear that HHS will just cherry-pick the answers that RFK Jr. has pushed for years, including that long-debunked idea that vaccines cause autism. The reality is there's already a solid base of data about autism's cause and some very successful methods to greatly improve a child's ability to overcome it. When I decided to do this episode on autism, I didn't have to look far to find one of the top experts on autism in the country, Dr. Amy Wetherby. She just happens to be my cousin. Amy is a distinguished research professor in the Department of Clinical Sciences and director of the Autism Institute in the College of Medicine at Florida State University. She's also a fellow of the American Speech Language Hearing Association with over 45 years of clinical experience, and the executive director of the FSU Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. There's much more, and I'll try to include some of it in the show notes, along with links to several websites developed by Amy and her colleagues, which can provide a huge amount of help to parents and teachers of autistic children. This interview was recorded in early June of 2025. If there are major updates from RFK Jr., I'll add them to the show notes. I learned so much from my conversation with Amy, and I think maybe you will too. Amy, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for the time and for coming on.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here.
I want to start by telling me why you got into this area of research, because autism as such was only really began to be known as a named disease, I think around 1980, when it got on the official list of mental disorders. So how did you get into it?
Yeah, great question. Well, it really first was named by Lee O'Connor in 1940 and Asperger in the 40s. So the name was out there, but it didn't get into our diagnostic manuals until, like you said, the 80s, although it wasn't called autism back then.
What was it called?
Other names. Well, it was called pervasive developmental disorder for quite a few years. And then autistic disorder came along. With the newest edition, of the diagnostic manual, we now call it autism spectrum disorder,
Right.
which really reflects the range and diversity of what we can see across the spectrum. So I got into it. I had a cousin that I babysat who had autism, and it kind of grew from there. And as an undergrad, I ended up babysitting another child with autism, and it intrigued me. I started out pre-med, and organic chemistry closed the door for me to go and become a medical doctor. So I majored in communication science and disorders, and I'm a speech language pathologist. So it's from my field that I got really interested in the brain, all sorts of different communication disorders that come from neurodevelopmental or acquired neurological disorders that affect communication. So I came into it from that perspective. I've been in the field for 45 years. Back then,
Wow.
a long time ago, we didn't know much.
Yeah, a lot of changes since then, right?
But I was drawn in and fascinated. I actually worked in the VA hospital during my doctoral studies, and I loved that, but I just missed the children, and so my first job was at Florida State University, and I was able to establish our autism program, and it's grown, and we have many different facets now.
What is the meld between the the verbal language disorders and autism specifically, because not all autistic kids by any means have language disorders. It's
Right,
at least to me as an
absolutely.
outsider.
Yeah, well, language has many different parts to it. So when you think about learning vocabulary, being able to talk, um, many people that have autism or on the autism spectrum do have language and can talk, but have difficulty with what we call pragmatics. That's the aspect of language that is using language in context and social interaction. So it's that part of language that's difficult. Now, some children with autism don't speak or
Mhm.
have difficulty learning to talk. And so we can see quite a range. We also can see different levels of cognitive abilities, learning abilities. And so we kind of think now about having more severe autism. There's a new term that's been formed called profound autism that has come out in the past few years. Autism Science Foundation has been behind some of that movement. And about a third of the spectrum is the profound autism, very significant challenges that affect everyday functioning and require sometimes 24-hour care and
Mm.
help and support. And then on the other hand, we have, the individuals who are in the genius range and can do incredible things, but still have difficulties. That core deficits of autism are the impairments in social interaction and social communication.
I was going to ask you about this spectrum and where the majority of kids and then, grown-ups with autism fall.
Yeah. So about a third have the very severe form where it's usually associated with severe intellectual disability or cognitive delays, and learning challenges, and many of those are not able to go on to speak.
Hmm.
Sometimes, we call it augmentative communication. There's ways with computers and devices or boards, picture boards, to be able to communicate when you can't speak. So some people with autism communicate other ways than verbal. And then we have the other two-thirds that really range in degrees of severity. But when I say autism spectrum disorder, that means it's falls under neurodevelopmental disorders, that it is an impairment even in the mild cases or the cases that are in the gifted, have gifted skills and the really, really high level of abilities, it still is, if it's diagnosed as autism spectrum disorder, it's a disorder. And that means it impairs everyday functioning. It's
Yeah.
pervasive. It affects your ability to do things at home, to go to work, to get a job, to do well in school. So um, there's also what we call traits, like autistic traits. And a lot of people have autistic traits. And we know autism runs in families, can run in families. And so we often see traits among family members. And sometimes autistic traits are actually really good skills to have, right? So these can be strengths that can be very handy to have in lots of different disciplines. But it doesn't necessarily mean there's a disorder, right? So there is this line that we draw in the sand or in the meatloaf, right, to say, okay, over here it's autism spectrum disorder. And that's a little different than just having some traits where, it may certain things can be a little harder for you, but you are able to um, kind of do okay in everyday life with some challenges. But
All right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Um, RFK Jr., who is now head of Health and Human Services, has said originally he said he was going to know all there is to know about autism by September, and everyone went, "Oh yeah." And now he's stretched it out in an interview with CNN to maybe March.
yeah.
Oh yeah, we're going to know a lot by September, and then we're going to all be checking it out even more, and we'll know by March. How much will he probably replicate, and what is he likely to find out? And essentially what I'm getting at is factual information. What do we know in general about autism, where it comes from, and what you can do about it, and what don't we know? What don't we know?
Yeah, so we know a lot. So I'm hoping they're not going to throw away all of the science that we know to this point. Now, there's some science, there may be a research publication here and there that is weaker or has flaws or errors or is inaccurate. But for the most part, we have an amazing scientific system of peer review that works very well. And studies, it goes through a lot of review and we have to show the evidence. And now we have to often have data to support that's available for others to analyze as well in the research we do. So we have learned a lot, but that doesn't mean it's not a good idea to do, more research and focus on particularly important research questions to learn more.
So
So,
what you say we've learned
so
a lot. You've already told us some of what we
yeah.
learned, but what else that is, of major importance have we learned? What do
So
we
one
know at this
thing, we
point?
know a lot about what causes autism. We
Which
know
is,
that it's genetic, it's genes. Now, genes are not the 100% whole picture, but they are a big part of the picture. And there's been a lot of research on the genotype of autism, and we now have hundreds, it may be more, and I'm not an expert on this, genes that have been identified associated with autism, and they're
mm,
and for about 20% of the spectrum. So we haven't yet identified the genes for the rest. So we need to know more, but we've learned a lot about the genetic mechanism of what's causing autism. And so that's been quite exciting. Now, when we have identical twins, if one has autism, the other has it 60 to 90% of the time,
mm,
not 100%. So if it was a simple genetic pattern, it would be 100%.
mm.
So there's other factors in addition to the genes that contribute to what causes autism. And the kinds of things that are being studied, of course, there's environmental pollution and things like that, although, not a lot has been identified in that area yet, but further research would be great. But we know a lot about like intrauterine environment. There's things that can happen during pregnancy that increase the risk. Prematurity have a 7% risk of autism compared to 3 point, what is it now, 3.4% of the general population. So there's older fathers are more likely. Uh,
Mm.
so there's specific things that have been identified that increase the likelihood. So it's really a likelihood. You've got your genes, they create a likelihood, and it's polygenetic. It's a mix. And that's, I think, partly when I see the spectrum, it's because it's different combinations of genes in different individuals. So the phenotype, the behavioral characteristics are going to vary based on not only the genes combination, the gene combination, but then the interaction of the gene and the environment. So it's the learning environment can influence outcomes of children as well. And
So
so,
it's much like anything else that's genetic. You can carry that gene,
yes,
um, and you may never know it, and nothing may
yes,
happen,
right.
or you may get a mild form of something, or you may get hit with the full business of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah, except it's polygenetic, so it's sort of a combination of genes that you get from your family, and there's the two sides of the family. So bringing in related disorders like attention ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, that occurs in about half of individuals on the spectrum also have ADHD. So having that in your family, so that's again a genetic liability that you have. You may have that, along with having. We tend to see other mental disorders in the families, like schizophrenia, bipolar. So we tend to see these run in families. It's kind of how it ends up getting to all entangled, right, in the unique child and then how it develops. One of the things that we've also learned, which is near and dear to my heart, is that if you can catch it early, you can actually shape the brain through the environment and prevent the severity or some of the features.
hmm,
Now, I don't believe that you can cure autism. And I don't even think that that's a healthy goal. I think that people with autism bring many unique characteristics and strengths to our um, population that are very valuable. But it's, for a child to not be able to learn to talk because of the features of autism, or have difficulty, or have um, challenging behavior that can be so severe that then they're not able to go to a certain classroom in a school and they have a much more restricted learning environment. Those are the things that we can prevent with early intervention and help. In our research, we are achieving at least 90 or 92% of our samples are learning to talk by 3. They've got a nice foundation for learning to speak and talk. And that's the
Are
getting them
these
early.
these what you've just talked about, the interaction of the genes and the early intervention? Are these generally agreed upon within the autism science community?
Um, I'm going to say yes, and I'm hoping that RFK Jr. will have wonderful people who are scientists in these areas on his team. But there's a really solid foundation of research. There are organizations like Autism Science Foundation and the Simons Foundation that share the scientific information about all research in autism, but have a lot of wonderful places on their website that you can go to and really get to understandable descriptions of the scientific literature on on the genetics and what's happening. It's changing rapidly, right? Because now, like my university just purchased a brand new genomic analysis, and I have
Mm.
a new colleague I'm working with who works and directs that institute. And so putting together what we've learned from, I do the behavioral phenotyping, meaning we characterize the behaviors of the children we study, and putting together the new genomic analysis, which is unbelievable what it can do. That's going to move science in the next decade, right?
Is
To a
that an
place.
AI?
Well, our AI, artificial intelligence,
Mm.
is likely part of everything we're going to do in the future, including how the genomic analysis is analyzed. But that's beyond my scope to talk about that. We're starting to try to incorporate AI into a number of different things we're doing with the behavioral characteristics. So it's exciting. It's going to really speed up
Yeah.
science. And then, the other thing, just I'll just put it out there because it's out there, is the issue of vaccinations. And all I can say is from the research that I've read, and what I see in my research, is that I'm confident that the MMR vaccine does not cause autism. And let me tell you why. First of all, there's been a lot of research on it. Doesn't mean more research is not needed. But I do believe there's a very strong basis for understanding the MMR vaccine. The MMR vaccine used to be administered closer to 18 months, and more recently now at 12 months. We are doing research in the first year of life, and we're studying screening and following samples from birth,
Mm.
and then studying the unfolding of learning to talk and identifying children with autism. And we can identify children by 6 to 11 months of age before they
Mm.
ever had the MMR. And that's why I'm confident the MMR. Now, that doesn't mean, there can be reactions to vaccinations, and we know that. And it doesn't mean they're not generally safe. And I don't mean to be light on that topic. It's a serious, heavy topic. But I am confident the MMR, like we're kind of looking at the wrong pole with a light completely to look there. And so to spend a lot of money on that, I think is wasteful. Now, there's vaccines that kids get at birth. I'm not saying we should look there, but that would make more sense than looking at the MMR, because we know from not just our research, but a lot of research now, that these features are unfolding in the first year of life, well before children get the MMR. And if you don't get the MMR to give that to your child, it does not mean your child will not get autism.
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole things with vaccine, and I think what confuses a lot of people is, yeah, some people are allergic to what some vaccines are made from. I remember when I first started doing stories on the flu vaccine, and the doctor who was talking about it was just saying, if you're allergic to eggs, stay away from it. Even
No,
though at
yeah,
that time it was considered a life-saving
right,
vaccine, because
right,
so many older people particularly die from flu every
yeah,
year. So, and I know there are other older
yeah,
vaccines that have other ingredients that some people are allergic to and that you're allergic to.
yeah,
So you're never going to get those
yeah,
vaccines. And I think that's very easy to conflate in
yeah.
a person's mind when that person doesn't know a whole lot about science or vaccines or anything. They just hear it, they see it, and
Mhm.
they say, oh, it's
Yeah.
bad.
And because of the public worry about the MMR, it used to have an ingredient that has mercury in it, and
Mm,
it was a preservative. I think it's called thimerosal, and so that got a lot of attention. And still, the mercury theory. I don't. I personally don't feel that the science has supported that theory, and some of it has been flawed, and the flaws have been identified. But fine to study that. But it's been removed from the MMR vaccine for, I think, I want to say almost 2 decades.
mm.
So we removed it a long time ago because, not because it caused autism, but because of the public fear of it. And now we've kind of circled back to this new fear. Um, and every parent has to decide for themselves what they're going to do in terms of vaccinating their child. But I'm just going to say it's not going to prevent autism.
I think it must be, I am childless by choice, and I think that it must be an incredibly exciting, but also an incredibly frightening experience to be, especially a new parent.
Yeah,
There's so
absolutely.
much that's unknown out there about, how to bring up your kid, what's going to happen,
Right.
all of this stuff.
Absolutely. And when you think about how many things can go wrong in terms of all sorts of developmental disorders, childhood cancer, there's so many things to worry about. As a parent, you can worry about them even when you're pregnant, right? You're worried.
Yeah.
And it is a scary thing. But the other way to look at it is kind of flip it the other way is that most children are born and end up fine, which is pretty amazing, even in spite of environments that are not optimal. And so there are certainly things that cause developmental delays, and genes plays a big factor, the familial genes. And there are mutations, the
Mm,
genetic mutations also.
mm.
But the early environment can have an incredible impact on children's outcomes. So the time that you can impact a child's development are in the first 1,000 days of life. And that's from
Oh,
conception. That's from conception. So that includes pregnancy, because it's taking care of yourself when you're pregnant, everything you can to have that healthy environment in utero. And then the first 2 years of life. So it's until 24 months of age. That's when the brain is developing the most rapidly. And that means the environment has the greatest impact on the child's brain and their abilities, which are based on brain development.
you told me about some of your experiences with your own granddaughter, which I think is, I hesitate to use the word fascinating, but as an outsider, and you
Mhm.
happen to be one of the best experts in autism, and here's your own granddaughter,
Yeah.
and how has that gone? Because you were telling me that she has moved forward,
Oh,
and
yeah.
there have been
Yes.
changes.
Yeah. So interestingly, I do have autism in my family. I mentioned a cousin. Also, my brother I think, my brother had a lot of traits, autistic traits, and he also had ADHD. He may have had autism, but it was never diagnosed. And he ran a very successful business. So he was
Mm.
always kind of referred to as eccentric. But he had a daughter with autism. So I knew about the familial risk. And it's interesting that it's a daughter. Now, neither of my children, they've been tested. We volunteered them for all sorts of testing. Neither of my children had autism, but my granddaughter ends up having autism. And I noticed the features in the first, well, it really by 6 months. Now, children with autism, when they're first born, can be very social and interactive. So she looked at faces, she smiled, but around 6 months, things started changing that I recognized as an expert. I knew what to look for. And I could see she would clench her hands, posture her fingers and arms a little bit unusual. She slowed down at looking at faces. By 9 months, she rarely looked at faces. And so I saw this unfolding, and that is the usual pattern. Some children will start unfolding at 2 months, at 4 months, at 6 months, maybe at 9 months. But usually in that first 9 months, if you know what to look for, it's unfolding. And so at 9 months, I kept inviting my daughter to a project that we had called Baby Navigator. So we developed Baby Navigator, which is used globally. It's a website and a web and a mobile app, the web app and a mobile app that you can join, that parents can join. Only parents or legal guardians can join. Anybody can go and get a lot of information from it on the public website. Parents can actually register and join and sign up. It's free. And then we offer our social communication growth chart. So we help you monitor your baby's development of social communication and language from every 2 months, from 2 months to 24 months. So we can catch delays if they're coming in. We also have a screening tool that we developed to screen for communication delay and autism.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start screening at 9 months. And I just pushed my daughter to join. I mentioned it, but she had a lot on her plate. It was her first child, difficulties nursing, which is very common, challenges with sleeping. And so she was worried about feeding and sleeping and didn't have time to think about the social communication milestones. And at 9 months, I kind of put my foot down. I said, I really need you to fill this out. Let's do it together. And then she agreed to get, then what we do, we have research that we invite you to participate in, depending on, if your baby fits in our protocol. And so she did, and we invited to get a home observation as our next step. And we have a new diagnostic tool to rate the home observation. We have instructions of what we want to see. And she came out autism. And then when she came to visit, she was living in a different state at that time. We then did the full evaluation and confirmed. But the important part is we have a treatment to get started. So we have a treatment that we've been developing for about 2 decades, and we've been polishing it and going younger and younger. And now our research is focused on 9 to 12-month-olds. And what so amazed me, because I got to watch this from the beginning, and of course we have video clips along the way, is how much change rapidly that you can get when you start really young. So most of our research had been starting at 18 months. And we had published a study a couple of years ago showing if you start at 18 months, children's outcomes are better than if you wait 9 months and start at 27 months. So this is going, now what we're focusing on is showing how much more you can gain by starting younger. And it's all about brain development and the impact.
I mean, and that's really true about everything with children.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you
learning.
start shaping them from the very beginning in these areas, then they move out to blossom.
Yes.
I mean, even the verbal, the difference between parents who talk to their children immediately in adult form and parents who either don't talk to them or talk to them baby talk. I mean, I read those studies years and years ago. And it is. I met your granddaughter briefly in our little Zoom when we did a pre-interview, and she looked directly into the camera, and she looked to me on the outside, meeting her for the first time like a normal kid.
Yeah, it would appear that way, and the gains that she made were tremendous. She learned to talk by 24 months she was talking, whereas most of when we started 18 months, by 36 months they're talking. So she kind of had that year edge because we started so young. And she learned how to interact first with her family. And then we very systematically, I was able to guide my daughter, and my daughter embraced. She got coached by one of my master coaches in our research study. And my granddaughter made tremendous progress learning her gestures, how to use a variety of objects, and expanded her cognitive skills. And she was delayed in motor by 36 months, fairly caught up on motor. And then now she's 5, and all of her skills are above average.
Wow.
Her motor, I think, is right around average or slightly above. but her verbal is now above average.
That's
But
amusing.
she still has autism. You may not notice it unless you spend a bit of time with her, but we notice it on a daily basis. So it's
Mm.
not that the autism's gone, it's that she has verbal abilities to negotiate. Her mom and the family now and her teachers have now the skills to support her learning. So she's just learning and learning and thriving and loves learning and is so
That's
inquisitive.
wonderful.
Yeah,
That is so cool.
but
I
still has
looked at
challenges.
some of the videos on the Baby Navigator site, and because you showed different children
Mhm.
in the same situations, and you could actually see the difference. It wasn't just reading
Right,
words, you know.
right. Yeah,
I thought it was quite compelling. I will
thank you.
include links, incidentally, to Baby Navigator, and you have another website also.
It's called Autism Navigator.
Right.
Yeah.
So those will all be on the show notes, so they'll be right there for you.
That would be great because really our unique niche in the field is the video. I've always been kind of a little tech nerd and love videoing. And so we always videoed everything as families come in. We video from the beginning and then as their child progresses. And so then I go back to the families and ask their permission. They're not obligated. Ask their
Mm.
permission. Would it be okay if we use these videos and we edit them and show them exactly what we're going to use to train others, to teach the world what does autism look like, particularly really young. So we developed, it's been since 2007 was our first online ASD video glossary that we launched. And then we got funding from the state of Florida and built Autism Navigator. So we have a whole collection of courses for families, for professionals on not only what is autism and what it looks like early, but how to provide the evidence-based early intervention, classroom-based, evidence-based classroom education. And then we develop Baby Navigator to really, which is for all families, where we have lots of typically developing children to show you what babies are learning from month to month. Because most parents don't know.
No,
My daughter wasn't thinking about it or
yeah.
aware. So you don't see these little delays that are there that we can catch before those delays get bigger and bigger.
I think this is so particularly helpful now to the younger generation, which has grown up and lives on some sort of video. Um, I know people who, if you put a book in front of them with all the information they will ever need to know for their entire lives, wouldn't look at it,
Right,
wouldn't even know how to process it.
right.
But give them the videos,
Yeah,
and they can, and they
exactly.
remember. And me, I got to write it down. It's got to be
Yeah,
written. I'm not a video oriented person in that
yeah,
respect, but
yeah,
the people who are having the kids are.
yeah.
And
Yeah, and that actually comes with strengths, but also some challenges. So one of the things that we know now, there have been dozens of studies on the impact of screen time. So you're talking
mm,
videos, you're watching videos on a screen, but you're also playing video games and all sorts of other things. You talk on the phone on a screen, right?
the yin and the
All of it.
yang, right?
Yeah. So what we know about the impact, here's what is scary to me to think about the title of this. What is the impact of screen time on 1-year-olds? And I'm like, whoa, are you putting 1-year-olds behind a screen? Yes, parents are. And it has been studied. And here's what the research says is that the amount of screen time that 1-year-olds are exposed to predicts developmental delay at 3 and 4 years of age.
Whoa. Whoa.
So, which is what makes Baby Navigator all the more important. So, what we can offer, and then, so you think about, all right, so what is the doctor going to say? Well, screen time is bad, don't use it. Well, if you're a parent, and I know with my daughter, there's no way she can do away with screen time. She would not survive the day without it. So while screen time can have a negative effect, what we're studying now is can we use Baby Navigator to teach parents how to include their child in all these everyday activities that they're already doing to counter the effects of screen time. So you can do the screen time. I mean, because I'm not going to ask a parent not to. But we need to educate them that this is not the way your baby's going to learn to talk or learn to learn. And here's these other strategies that you can learn to do while you're cooking, preparing food, doing the dishes, clearing the table. Your baby should be with you and taking on a role. And so that's what we have lots of videos in a variety of everyday activities that parents engage in to teach all parents how to support your child's learning. And that will counter and maybe even lessen the need for as much screen time.
I have friends whose babies, from the time they can hold a phone in their hand, have their mother's or their father's phone. They
Yeah.
know where to go for their videos.
Yeah. Oh,
They,
yeah.
it can
Oh, yeah.
find it on the screen
Absolutely.
immediately, and
Yeah.
that's what they're doing
Yeah,
all the time.
absolutely. And kids
It's
with autism are very good at that. Yeah, and so we want to raise parents' awareness that, I mean, I think the important thing is that your baby is not going to learn to talk or learn to learn on a screen. But what's really critical is for parents to learn how to support their child's learning in things you're already doing. It doesn't take more time. It just takes learning some new strategies, and it's fun. And that's what my daughter found. So that's what we do, and it's more extreme or intense as we teach parents of children who have autism or early signs of autism. But for all parents, it can enhance your child's development early, which is going to make them a better student when they get to kindergarten or when they get to preschool.
I think you briefly used it in explaining this, but you also you use this term, which I think is very useful, which is to teach kids to learn,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that particularly in terms of autistic kids.
Yeah. Yeah. The approach that we used to take, and we still take too much in teaching students with autism or children with autism, is rote learning.
Mm,
It's basically feeding them the lines and saying, say this, do this, good talking, good looking. It's very unnatural. And what the research has shown us, and this was going on in my major professor's lab, Bob Cagle, back when I was a doc student, but we've learned so much uh, from this. And the Lovas Institute, who was the originator of some of this, has moved on. That rote learning does not generalize. It's not real learning. They
mm,
can learn to parrot you or mimic you in that situation. It's like training an animal where the animal's not thinking, right? A lot of animals
right,
are thinking.
right.
Children need to learn to think. They
Yeah.
absolutely need to learn to think. They can learn to think. Even if they have profound autism, they can learn to learn. It's at a maybe slower pace, a different level, but all children can learn. But it's sometimes we need to look at how we're teaching them, and that's part of the problem. And so what we've developed, and we've been doing this for about 20 years, we've kind of led the way along with a couple other key intervention researchers. And now the research is really heading in this direction of using more naturalistic with a developmental framework to teach children with autism.
Once you have determined that your child is autistic, um, it, you know, yes, you can use your videos. Let's say you live in a rural area and there's nobody who had great expertise with this. It's a wonderful thing. You actually have a resource now. But you live in a big city or around a big city, and you want your child to have more involvement with an expert. Do these people exist? Are they easy to find? And how would you find one?
I mean, that's part of the problem. There's a long wait list for diagnosis in many places. It can be 6 months, a year, several years to get the diagnostic exam. So there's not enough trained diagnosticians. And then there's definitely not enough early intervention providers who have any expertise on autism. And then teachers. A lot of teachers, I got an email recently from a teacher just saying, I have a student with autism in my class and I don't know anything about autism. What do I do? Right? At least she knows to reach out and where to reach out. Like, that's
Yeah.
great. We have a lot to offer. So, what we've developed with the funding from the state of Florida is a whole host of online courses. And our courses are about 80% video illustration. So, we show you, teach you how to teach students with autism or how to support your child's learning by using video clips with narration and explanation so that you can understand what's happening. We often get down to the nuances, like we, watch a clip and we look sometimes frame by frame. Look what happened. What happened when you did this? What happened when you didn't do this? So it can be a really good tool. Now, telehealth and virtual learning kind of got a bad name after, I don't know, are we after COVID? After COVID, post uh, COVID. Um, and I think everybody got burned out on it. But I'm here to say that mobile coaching, if you can have an expert be able to reach you and be a bug in your ear while you're interacting with your child, can be very effective and can save money. It saves the time for you to get to the expert or the expert to get to you. The expert gets to see what you see in vivo in that live moment. And that's when you need to be coached. That's when parents are going to learn the best, when they're actually trying to use the skills, or a teacher who's learning. So that's what we still do, the telehealth, we do the mobile and think it's great. But I understand, you can take your child to an expert, but it doesn't necessarily get you everything you need, or you may have to wait so long that you've missed the opportunity for early.
Yeah. I think this is key, and I think it bears repeating that the earlier you can intervene with a child, the better off that child's going to be.
Yes. And it's so often that doctors and other professionals and parents are, oh, it's just a baby. Let's wait and see. Well, okay, you can wait and see, but I know in my granddaughter's case, she would be a different child now. She
Yeah.
would likely have a significant cognitive impairment. That is something we can prevent in most cases, not 100%. Some of that cognitive delay is genetically based and very hard to prevent, but you can minimize. But in her case, we prevented it. She
I think
doesn't
that's
have a
just
cognitive delay.
it's such good news and so amazing.
And
And
she's an amazing kid because
I
she has
think so
autism.
few people know
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I,
Yeah,
I
and
hope
I
I
have
hope we
many
can
other
get to the
colleagues.
world with
Yeah.
our
I
podcast.
work with other colleagues and we do this work together, and we all know this. It's getting the word out, and it is easy to just dismiss because often the early signs of autism make it look like the child's really interested in something and they're engaging themselves.
Yeah.
So, oh, they occupy themselves. They're doing great.
I also think, I mean, again, not having children, it's very different. So that when I'm around a child, I'm very aware of the baby or the child, depending on the age and everything. And my impression of from babyhood, when you see a baby looking around, they're sucking up information at a rate you just can't imagine. I mean,
Exactly.
imagine opening your eyes for the
Yeah.
first time and there's a world
Yeah.
and you got to learn everything.
Yes.
And somehow they do.
But the baby needs a guide, right? The
Yeah.
baby needs a guide to guide them in that world of what they're seeing and what they're interested in and what they're seeking out to learn. So babies are born natural explorers and they want to learn. We want to promote that and support that. And so that learning to learn, language is a key to learning to learn because learning to talk, learning
Mm.
to communicate, and then learning to talk is the path to learning to learn. And so you start with gestures and actions, figure out, well, what do I do with this object? Babies explore, and then what can I do with it? What is it? Oh, it's a spoon. I can feed myself. Then you learn the word spoon. And then mom can say, get your spoon, use your spoon. So then the child learns the word. But then the word spoon becomes a concept. Well, spoons are part of a set of utensils.
Yeah.
So then you're learning categories. And that's the learning to learn, is learning all these different categories that then build into then tools. It's a tool. And then you think about your computer's a tool, right? So we all have tools that we're learning about in our advanced fields, but that starts with learning tool use and learning how to interact with objects and knowing what they are and what you can do with them.
It's,
In infants and
when you
toddlers.
break it down like that, it's so logical.
Yeah,
But I
it's
never heard
fun.
anybody break it down
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
It's
Seriously.
fun. I love watching babies and I love watching children with autism learn. It's fascinating. And their brains work a little differently.
Hmm.
Each child, they see things. I see it's my granddaughter has lived with us for a little part of the time, and I've gotten to see her on a daily basis and then at a distance. And it's just amazing to watch her learn. And now she's getting ready for kindergarten. And what's been so great is the school that we ended up getting her into. It's a general ed preschool, but it had a very good curriculum. And she learned so much from school. For all babies, we're here to help and give you ideas on how to teach your child to talk and to learn.
That brings, I think, so much hope to parents, and it's just great.
Yeah.
Let's move a little bit forward because a lot of people, of course, are talking about cures for autism. Um, what kind of research is going on in that area? And for some children, maybe it would never be necessary, but for others, it might be.
Well, I think one area of study is genetics, so gene therapy. I mean, they're definitely doing research. Another area is stem cell. I'm not an expert on those, so I'm not even going to make a judgment, but I'm just going to say that there's a lot of private money and some federal money that has been invested in those areas of intervention. And then also improving diagnostic tools so we can catch children early. There's a lot of attention on eye tracking devices to identify autism early and so on. What we do is we video and we look at behaviors. That's our niche. And
You give
that's
you
always going to
give
be
parents
important.
tools to work now
Yeah.
with
And then the
the
tools to
now,
work with. But
not the
that's, yeah,
tomorrow,
yeah.
but the
But that's
now.
always going to be important because these genetic markers, they're not catching everyone.
Mm.
And the eye tracking has, accuracies similar to what we're finding with our diagnostic tools. It's putting these good tools together to improve science.
Um, is
Yeah, I
there,
think I escaped your question about, curing autism. I
yeah,
don't think autism can be cured. I think that
huh.
it's, and I don't think it needs to be cured. I've watched, watching my brother grow up and seeing his abilities as an adult. I think what we need for people who have autism or autistic people is they need support so they can learn in their natural environments, whatever that is. And their cognitive ability may limit, where they're going to be able to learn and how much care they need, but they need help learning to learn. And my brother certainly had, I think as a sibling, I helped him I have a more naturalistic approach to things, and I think I helped support his learning
Mm.
along the way. He also wore me out at moments where I'm like, I don't want to see you for a couple of months when we were together. I need a break from you. He was challenging too, and to my parents. So that's the other thing is to alleviate the challenge for parents. This is a tough road to have a child with autism. It's tough. Higher divorce rate than the already high divorce rate, much higher among families with autistic children. It's challenging.
Is
So
it any
just,
different here than in the rest of the world?
well, I think well, first of all, we're learning a lot more about what autism looks like in the rest of the world. And what's coming out is that it looks similar. It looks similar across environments, of course, across languages, but the actual behavioral features are very similar across environments and across races and ethnicities and economic levels. So we're learning that with the prevalence of autism, it's interesting. We now had a new release of the prevalence, and now it's 1 in 31 people. And this is based on actually 8-year-olds that it's measured.
That's a
So
lot.
1 in 31 now, up from 2 years ago, it was 1 in 36. So it's gradually increased. The CDC has been tracking, monitoring the prevalence for years. Well, there was a study that just came out in British Columbia by one of my colleagues, Karen Bopp was one of the lead investigators. And I think their new prevalence is 1 in 25. I'm close on that. I may not be exact. So it's higher. They did it in a little bit more, in a smaller region, but a more systematic strategy to catch more. So I think even the 1 in 31 is lowballing what it really is. So it is most everyone knows someone who either has a child with autism or has autism.
When we talk about these diagnoses and that they've been growing, is it perhaps because we're now aware of it? I mean, if the
Well,
disease didn't exist as such written down that we knew the name for it, until
so
into the
absolutely.
1980 area,
Absolutely. Public awareness. You know, the movie Rain Man, that did a lot for everybody learning what is autism. And that was the more severe version, right, of autism.
right?
And that was just a wonderful, amazing movie that depicted autistic features quite well. And so that the media then has continued and grown. And so there's a lot of attention to public awareness, but also we have better diagnostic tools.
Mm,
So we have our gold standard, the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, which is fabulous. But I think the research shows 7% of children in the world are diagnosed with it because there's not diagnosticians available who have expertise to use it. But it's widely used in research, which helps research compare groups of children. So that, just all of the better diagnostic tools, more public awareness. If you look at the CDC data, and they put out this surveillance publications about every 2 to 3 years, sometimes it'll be once a year, but usually 2 to 3 years. They've been doing that for the past 20 years, I believe. And so if you look at their patterns, what you see is that the newer, higher estimates have now include a, a reasonable proportion based on the population of minorities, of different ethnicities, of girls,
mm.
right? We used to say 1 out of 4 boys, one girl to 4 boys with autism. Now it's maybe 1 in 3. So we're picking up cases that we were missing as the prevalence is going up. So there are a lot of good reasons why the prevalence estimates are going up. We were simply missing a
Yeah.
lot of the population before, and we're doing better. I think that this study in British Columbia, they're doing even better. It's more accurate.
Amy, I think that pretty much sums up what we can say today, unless you can think of something else that you want to talk about.
Well, I maybe end with or highlight the importance of intervention. And we have studied an intervention model that has had really impactful differences on children's outcomes. By coaching the parents, it's relatively inexpensive. We're now collaborating with UNICEF and bringing this treatment to very low income countries, which has been
Mm.
amazing. Our whole treatment model is around the everyday activities of what parents are already doing. So if you go to, we're working in Uganda and Peru and Bulgaria, and we're designing the intervention around what the parents are doing with their
How
children.
helpful. It's,
So I hope that parents will not be afraid to seek help. We hope that Baby Navigator, which is for, that first 2 years of life, to help parents know how to support all children's learning. And then if your child might have autism, we're a place that you can go and kind of do a home checkup, like it's great to go get a mammogram, but you also want to do the self-screening for breast cancer, right?
yeah, yeah.
And you can do a self-screening by going to Baby Navigator, and then you can decide what you want to share with your doctor. We're going to encourage you to, and then we have intervention. We have strategies to teach all parents, and if it ends up being autism, strategies to get going right away. So we hope that we can save that time, the wait time that can lead to, the features of autism can actually lead to worse behaviors and worse learning. And learning can,
I think if parents latch on to this podcast, you will have helped them so much. So I
well, we hope our
thank you.
websites, and a lot of it's for free, not everything, but a lot of it is. And
Yeah,
so,
that was the one question I was going to ask, and then we got sidetracked. All this intervention you talk about beyond the parent, him or herself, is there money anywhere to help people if they need specialized help?
there absolutely is. But the thing is, a lot of money is being spent on intervention that's not necessarily evidence-based or effective. So it's very important. So one of the things we wanted to develop was a treatment that's effective but cost efficient. So what's out there now that insurance will cover is 20 hours or 25 hours a week, where an ABA, applied behavior analysis, a therapist will work directly with the child, or it may be in a smaller classroom. Well, we came up with an intervention where we can coach the parents, and we don't want to burden or stress the parents, but support them 3 sessions a week for 6 months, then 2 sessions a week for 3 more months. So it's much less than having to do 25 hours a week and keep doing that for years. We give the parents the skills they need. And what the parents tell us is it also helps, it empowers them to then advocate for their child for the rest of their life, which is what they will need to do. So we hope that we can offer something that's cost efficient that all families can access. We also think it has some advantages of even the expensive therapies. And there's a lot of quackery out there, so you got to be careful.
Yeah, I imagine.
To look at the science and know what's evidence-based.
All right, Amy, thank you. I so appreciate this conversation. I love being able to help people, and I think this is one of the best conversation we've had on this podcast to be able to do that.
Thank you so much. And if we can ask for help, it's for people to share Baby Navigator, that link, with anyone, others, so that we can spread the word and give access to more families. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. Dr. Amy Wetherby is a distinguished research professor in the Department of Clinical Sciences and director of the Autism Institute in the College of Medicine at Florida State University. She's also a fellow of the American Speech Language Hearing Association with over 45 years of clinical experience and the executive director of the FSU Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. There's more in the show notes, along with links to the Autism Navigator and Baby Navigator websites. Now, in my next podcast, that would be episode 35, we hope to do an update on the UK's NHS. That's the model for every other government-managed healthcare service. July 4th is the one-year anniversary of the Labour Party winning control of the UK government in a landslide election, and promising to fix the broken healthcare system. So, what's actually changed about the NHS, which was so creaky that it could barely blow out its 75th anniversary candles the year before? More money? More doctors, less waiting time for appointments, more rooms available for emergency hospital patients. None of the above? We'll see. Look for episode 35 to drop on the third Tuesday of July, since I schedule just one episode a month. And as always, please subscribe and share. The video version is on YouTube, audio on Apple, and on all the other major platforms, including my host platform, the Podbeam website and app. Show notes and links on my website, stephanieshelton.com/conversations. I'm Stephanie Shelton, and until I see you again, take care of yourself and all those you love. Conversations on Health, How We Get There is produced and edited by Frank Harold. Research assistance from Dr. Richard Saltman, Professor Emeritus of Health Policy and Management, Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University in Atlanta.